All right, let's do prototypes. So first, let's go to wonderfulgc.blackboard.com. Use your password manager or your one password. I'm using one password to do this. I mean, I'm just as guilty as everybody else for having the same password for multiple things. I have about 4 that I cycle through. But it's not good. You should technically have a different password for everything. Don't make it easy on the hackers working with the dictionaries. All right, so we're going to go to week 10, object prototypes. Only one file to download. Click on the starter file. Go ahead and throw that wherever you like. I'm going to throw it on my desktop. Bam. I'm going to unzip it. Zip it. I'm going to go into my live server. CD desktop. Nope, that's not what it's called. Let's find out what it's called. CD starter. That's what it's called. Starter, if I can spell. God's sakes, live. I'm going to open that up as well. And then we'll live server that. Bam. There we go. That seems to be something weird. Like the first line always tabs everything in, but it's fine on the network. I really don't understand why it's doing that. All right. Not that it's super important. Okay, we are working on prototypes. Let me just pull open the actual week 10 in my notes. Okay, this is a big topic. If you look, there's a lot of info. And we're going to take it slow. And we're going to, it wasn't really something that I could chunk into 2 parts. Okay? We can spread it across 2 classes. I can't really chunk it into 2 parts because there's no definitive, like, this is part 1 of prototypes and this is part 2. I couldn't really figure out where there's like a good point to cut it. But we're going to talk about object prototypes. So in JavaScript, we don't have class inheritance. But that's not 100% true. ES6, which is ECMAScript 6. So ECMAScript is like the standardization for JavaScript. So if we go back in time to like what a lot of browsers support now as the stable version, which is ECMA 5, that's what most people are used to writing. And a lot of the things we do is from ECMA 5, which was supported from IE 9 and up, which is really all you should care about because nobody's using IE 8 anymore. It's not a thing, right? Actually, you shouldn't really care about anything below IE 10. That being said, so you have things like Query Selector and Query Selector All, which were introduced in ECMA 5. You have the for of and the for in, which were introduced in ECMA 5. And you have string interpolation, which was introduced in ECMA 5 as well. So the cool thing about those particular features is they're really all we've been using. We haven't really used any of the more advanced stuff that you would get in like ECMA 6, like the class. And if you watch MPJ, like the fun function, he actually talks about the class and what it is, and he explains quite explicitly that class is not necessary. It essentially wraps prototype at the end of the day. So no matter what, even though you're using class the way you would think you are, you're still wrapping prototype. You can still wind up with prototypal things happening and not something you're expecting. It is much better for you to embrace prototype, understand how prototype works, and work with prototype that way, than use the ES6 class definition. The reason why I'm stressing this is because many of you are going to go home tonight and go, fuck prototypes. That thing is way easier, and I get what that's doing, so I'm going to use that. And the problem is you're going to wind up with a lot more hurt at the end of the day because, like I said, even though it says class on it, it's still not a class. It's still prototypal inheritance, and things will go south at certain points when you're not expecting it. The other factor is, too, is class is only supported in browsers that support ECMA 6, which means you are alienating a good group of people. However, all of that being said, I do embrace the idea of you learning ECMA 6, especially considering next semester you have, not the co-op semester that you're going into, but the summer semester. You'll likely have me, because most people hate teaching React, so you'll likely have me. So if you get me, we'll be doing React and Node, and the back end of Node is all ES6, so we'll be using class quite heavily. But in that scenario, it's different. It's just, that's what it's done. That's just how that particular framework works. However, that being said, if you want to use ES6, there's this really cool website, and you can use ES7 and ES8 and soon ES9. Every year they release a new standard, but most of the browsers, except for Chrome, aren't supporting anything. A lot of them support ES7, but haven't got to ES8 yet, because it takes money and it takes time and stuff like that, right? But Chrome are always up to date. They're always right at the top and the newest release. But you can use all that stuff. You go to this website, babeljs.io, and what's really cool about Babel, on this side, you can type in whatever it is you want. So we'll say document.query selector. Not that this should be a problem. We'll say body. And that's supported as of that particular version. What's a good ES6 one? Class, person, and it spits that out. Because class is not really supported by all browsers, so it gives you the browser-compatible version of that. So you can write everything in ES6, ES7, ES8, ES9, whatever, it doesn't matter. Copy it, and then paste it in here, copy what comes out of here, and put that into your code. Even easier than that would be if you've already installed Live Server. For you people, you've already installed Node, you can install the Browserify library, or you can install the Babel transpiler and do that automatically. You can have it listen to the directory and automatically Babel it every single time. Does anybody know where the word Babel comes from?
Tower of Babel.
Yeah, the Tower of Babel. Anybody know where Babel comes from if you think about fiction? Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the Babel fish. Yeah. All right, so that's that. But we're not going to do classes. We're going to learn about prototypes so that you understand what this thing is and its coolness. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I don't 100% understand prototypes myself. I like to think I get about 80% of what a prototype actually is, but I feel like I still have problems using it. That being said, there's not very often that I even do prototypal inheritance, but I do use it because it comes with most of the libraries we're working with. Like, for example, the DOM that we constantly use. It uses prototypal inheritance quite heavily. But, all right, let's start from the basics. The basics are reference, right? By reference. What does by reference mean? In programming, there are two fundamental concepts of how data is passed by your program, right? When we assign a value to a variable, it gets assigned, that value automatically gets copied into the variable into a place in memory. That's how that works. If I take that variable and now assign it to another variable, right? So if we did this kind of thing, I have x is equal to 5. This value is copied into here. This refers to blah, 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 whatever, some memory address, okay? If I take y and make it equal to x, it now copies this again into here and goes and stores it, blah, 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 into a brand new memory address. This is by copy, okay? Every time I assign x to another value, to another variable, it just copies it. Over and over again, we're just copying it. We're never actually referencing x's memory location, okay? Objects, however, don't work like that. Objects, arrays, functions, they all don't work like that. The way they work is when I create this thing, right? It takes this object literal and all of its contents, and it assigns it off to wherever our location is for our memory address. And this data gets stored in this memory address, and X becomes a reference point to that memory location for us. Now, if I take Y and make it equal to X, what actually happens is this does not get copied into Y. Instead, Y now references where X's memory location is. Okay? This seems very complex, but it's actually extremely cool and extremely valuable because we're passing by reference, we're not loading memory up with multiple copies of this object, right? And objects can get quite big, right? We're not loading them all into memory. Every single time we want to move the object to a new variable, we're taking another piece of this and shoving it into memory. We only have so much memory, right? Like we can only go so far before we reach a capacity. We don't want to do that, especially if the structure is exactly the same every damn time. There's no reason to constantly store it into memory. So instead, we store it into a reference location, and then we can actually access that. Do you need to know how this works? Kind of. You need to understand that that's what's happening. So that way, when you add new properties or new functions, you can see that it's affecting your objects that are inheriting from this guy or that have been copied from this guy, right? So that you can see that that's occurring and you understand what's happening. Do you need to understand it at this granular memory level? No, you don't. You don't need to understand that it's writing into the memory location because we don't have pointers in JavaScript, so you're not going to access that directly anyways. You just need to understand that variable assignment is always by copy. Objects, arrays, functions are always passed by reference. Always. Okay? Incidentally, JavaScript does not give you the ability to change a variable assignment to a reference, which is kind of annoying. You can do it in many other languages. You may have seen it before. This is going to be totally butchered, and I apologize in advance. It's this symbol, the ampersand. Actually, that wasn't too bad. Pretty damn good. There you go. Sometimes, in some languages, you could do this, which says, this is a reference, okay? And if I said y is equal to this, instead of y getting the copy of 5, y would just get the address reference location. And now y would connect directly to the reference location. Now that's available in most languages except for JavaScript. They don't have a reference thing like that, which can be annoying when you're trying to pass values around. So the way around it is you wrap them in an object, because objects are always passed by reference. That's basically that in a nutshell. That little last bit is not really hugely important, but I like to throw little things for those of you that are like that kind of granular stuff. So, yeah.
So it uses by copy method just for numbers?
No, by copy for any variable assignment. So, any literal. That's booleans, strings, and numbers. So any literal assignment. And then anything else, like an object or a function or any of that type of stuff, is immediately passed by reference. So we're actually going to do it. We're going to show it. I have an example here where we actually create an object, then we modify it, and we do some crazy stuff with it. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go open up my console, and I'm going to undock it, which I don't generally do. And we'll shove it over here to the left side. And I'm going to actually, oh, that's really handy. Go away, stupid thing. Ah, go away. Nope, not what I wanted. Let's try this again. There we go. Oh, and then other things happen over here. Fantastic. How do I exit this stupid thing again? Oh, I clicked it. Boop, boop. There we go. Okay. got my shit together. We're good to go. All right. So over on this side, inside my console, and you're welcome to open up your console and follow along if you really want to. Totally up to you. I'm going to create an object literal, right? So we all know how to create the object literal. We give a variable name, right? Just like we would do any normal variable name, no different than if I was going to assign 5 or anything else. But instead, I'm going to assign an object to it. So that's the opening to my literal. I'm going to create 2 properties. I'm going to call one prop1 and give it value 1, and the other prop2 and give it value 2. And then I'm going to close my object. So I have this new object, right? And I can see that. It doesn't matter. Yeah. That's a force of habit. It's called trailing commas. Some languages support trailing commas like this. Others don't. The cool thing about that is if I ever go back into my code and add another property, I don't really have to worry about remembering the comma. That's why it's kind of just habitual. I just do it. I don't know why. I just do it. Trailing commas are supported in Ruby, and they're also supported in this. They're not supported in PHP, incidentally. All right, so I have my 2 things, right? So I'm going to create a new object. So let obj equal my obj. There we go. Now, many of you, probably not now because I told you about references, but many of you might think, cool, obj is a brand new copy of my object. It's its own new instance of this thing. But that's not actually true. So if I console.log obj.prop1 and prop2, we should see value 1, value 2, because we would if it was a copy, right? If it was a copy, you'd see the same thing, because it's a direct copy of those values, right? There we go. We have value 1, value 2, right? Which you would expect. However, I can prove that this is not a copy. We'll take my obj. I'm going to create a new property on it called prop3. I mean, on the nose, right? Value 3. And if obj is a copy, will it have access to prop3?
Yes.
If it's a copy?
No.
No, it won't, because we copied it before we created the property, right? So if it's by copy, it has no access to this thing. If it's by reference, does it have access?
Yes.
Yes, 100%. Just out of curiosity, how many people think that obj has access to prop3? Okay, cool. I like to, well, you know, participation is participation. How many people don't think? They think it's a copy. Yeah, you see, I knew it. Some of you are not participating. obj. Dot prop. Oh, you see, there's prop 1. That's totally a variable. There's prop 2. There's prop 3. Which shows that it is by reference, not by copy. Right? So that's pretty cool. Yes, Becca.
So, you said when you, okay, so for objects or functions, you said it's by reference.
Yes.
But say you create a new variable, say called new variable,
Yep.
and have this value at my obj dot one. How would that be?
That's a good question, actually. Let's do that. So let new var, we'll say, right? Good enough. Equals my obj dot prop1. So I think because prop1 is technically a literal, it's a string literal, right? The value sitting inside prop1 is a string literal. I believe that will be by copy because it's a string literal. So if it's a string literal, a numeric, or a Boolean, it's always, always, always by copy. So if I'm correct, this will be definitely by copy. So now, if I go new var, it should just be value 1, right? So let's change it. So my obj dot prop1 equals I think this is by copy, but Becca thinks it may be by reference. Did you say who? Becca meet Ali, Ali meet Becca. There you go. Now, if I call new var, it's either going to say, I think this is by copy, but Becca thinks this is by reference, which means you would be correct, and it's by reference. But I think it's by copy, so I think it will say var 1. So we'll say new var, and it's by copy. But that's only because it's a string literal. It's returning a string literal. So when we say it's equal to the object, that's reference. We get back a memory address, that's what gets stored into it. But when we do it by the actual property's value, then we're getting a reference point to that property's value. Or sorry, we're getting a copy of that property's value. We can kind of see the same thing again. I'm just going to clear the screen. If we say myobj dot greeting equals, you know, you guys are cool if I write this as an arrow function just to save time. Hello. Okay, so there's our myobj.greeting. And if I create a new variable, let greet equal myobj.greeting. There we go. So I've signed the function definition off to greet. And I can prove that if I call greet, there's hello, right? Now, if it's passed by copy, if I make a change to the myobj.greeting, it won't be reflected in the greet variable, right? So if I take myobj.greeting, and I'm going to rewrite this entire function, so console.log salutations. Thank you. Examples are friggin' hard. There we go, right? If I call greet, it should say hello if it's by copy. If it's by reference, which I think it is, it's going to say salutations. Greet. It says hello, so it's by copy. Turns out I'm totally wrong. Yeah. So that's kind of interesting. It also means you have to kind of watch out for that kind of stuff. So it looks like it's by objects only, not function then. We could prove that as well, but I mean we could keep going down this rabbit hole. Maybe I'll do a video on the weekend, and I'll just do a bunch of different examples, and we'll see which ones are by copy and by reference. Yeah.
The only example you were showing, you were saying this only by copy. Can you show the example when it would be by reference? So when you make a change, it will actually show.
Yeah. So if we were to take, we said let whatever h1 equal myobj, that's by reference. So now h1 has access to everything that myobj has access to.
Even though if you make the changes right now afterwards.
Yep. So if I take myobj dot greeting equals, why don't we'll do the hello one again. So we'll change it to hello, and then I do h1 dot greeting. It's by reference. However, it looks like if I assign the function off to the variable, no, that's it. I've taken it and I've copied it and I've moved it into the variable. Which is interesting. It's not what I was expecting because I didn't think that worked like that. I thought once you assign, and again, it is the function definition and it's not the named function. So that might be why. But that's getting a bit more computer sciencey. Suffice to say, objects are passed by reference, always. Okay? Values, literal values, are always passed by copy. So that looks like it's Boolean, strings, numerics, function definitions. If they're passed that way, then it's always by copy. So why is this important? Because this actually comes into play when we're actually working with prototyping. As we said before, most things in JavaScript are objects, right? Objects by their very nature are passed around by reference. This means that instead of creating a complete duplicate of your object, only the memory address of the object is actually sent off to whatever you're assigning it to. So when you attempt to access any properties or methods, you're always accessing the original object, always. The largest benefit to that is that any modifications to the original obviously cascade through any reference point to that particular object. Okay. Let's recap. Let's recap on object constructors. In order for us to utilize object constructors, we had to understand the concept of this. We also need to understand the concept of new, right? In objects, this is always representative of the owner object, whatever we're currently in the context of. Okay, that does get a lot more complex when you start dealing with nesting functions and stuff like that. It can get really, really complex, but it's a little bit out of scope for us. Which in this case of an object constructor would be the wrapping function. So if you look at this particular object constructor that's over to the right of the screen, if you have this document open, you will see that we have the parameters here, and we're using this .prop1 to set the properties of this thing, right? So that means when I go to instantiate this, I can go person.whatever and grab that property. Let's create a new person object constructor. So we'll. This unfortunately is like 100% console driven this time, which I try not to do. I don't really like doing everything completely console driven, just because it makes things a bit harder to follow. I usually like to print it out to the screen, but just for speed and that kind of stuff, it's a little bit easier to do it this way. All right, so I'm going to open up main.js. So you want your main.js open, and we'll start at step 1. So in step 1, we're going to create a new object constructor, which we just learned, right? So this object constructor we're going to call person, and we're going to give it 2 parameters. We're going to give it a first name parameter and a last name parameter. And then I'm going to give it a set of braces, and I'm going to close the brace just after the step 8 mark. Oh, I feel the sore throat coming. I do not want to be sick. All right, we want to make sure that we add the properties, so I'm going to give it this first name and make it equal to the argument that winds up getting passed. I'll do the same thing for the last name. I mean, this is object normalization at its best. Having a first name field and a last name field means that the user puts in what they consider to be their first name and their last name. When you have a full name field, it's hard to normalize that data. It's just a side note when you're working with data. As said before, object constructors are just simply functions. You can call this function. It's not going to do anything because it doesn't have a return value, but you're not going to break anything if you call it. Incidentally, if you gave it a return value, so if you said return hubbubaloo, that's what I want to spell. Hubbubaloo. That's a weird word, but. And if I call person here, I get hubbubaloo, hubbubaloo, or whatever. Drink less. All right. Example, using objects as values. So in JavaScript, we can assign any value to a property. I know I say this over and over again. Strings, numbers, functions, variable, or sorry, yeah, well, you can't variables. What else? Arrays, and I think I'm missing one. Objects, right? So because of that, we have the power that we can turn our objects into very powerful data structures that store other things. And remember, objects are always passed by references, so you can literally create like massive reference chains where you're just assigning all these objects to other properties and then have access to those objects, right, through the reference chain. We have created a person object constructor, but I want to add some other details to it. So in the past, we've actually hard-coded the age. I'd like to actually try to calculate the age based on a date of birth that they provide. So we can actually use, we don't need to write our own date function. JavaScript already has a date function in it. It has a date object, actually, with a whole bunch of properties available to it that we can utilize. And we can do that by actually assigning the date object to a property called date of birth. So the first thing we're going to do is add a new parameter in our person called DOB. Then we're going to say this.dob is equal to new date. There's that new word, right? New date, and we're going to pass it dob. Now, dob does require to be a valid date format. JavaScript tends to like year, month, day. That's the format that it prefers, so we'll do that. It doesn't matter if you do it by slashes or by dashes, but it does like year, month, day. That's what it prefers. But it's going to return back an actual date object. That date object is really cool because you can do calculations on it. You can add days, subtract days, or months, or years. You can get back timestamps. You can do a lot of really cool stuff with that. It isn't just the date. It's a whole bunch of stuff all available to us, including a diff function, which allows us to calculate the difference between today and today and then the date that you were born. So instantiating our object, we use the new keyword, right? That's what makes this whole thing doable. New does the following. It creates an empty object. It sets a new property on the object called prototype. It binds all the properties you defined, so this.firstname, this.lastname, and this.dob, with the this keyword to the object, and then it returns the newly created object. So that's what I told you guys happens under the hood, right? And I promised you it wouldn't be on a test. I will keep my promise, because it is a lot of confusion. So we're going to create a new person using our object constructor. So that's under step 3. So create a new person with your first name and your last name who has your date of birth. So I'm going to say let Sean equal new person. My first name is Sean. My last name is McKinnon. And my date of birth is 1978, 12/22. So December 22nd, 1978. Superman came out then with Christopher Reeves. It's around that same time. It was a long, bloody time ago. What's that?
How you remember your birthday?
No. No. I was born when Superman came out. Let me look that up on Wikipedia. And I'll tell you when my birth date is. All right, so let's console log, because I said there's going to be a lot of that. Console log Sean, or your name. And sure enough, I get my date object spit out, so I'm going to click my little arrow, and I can see that there's my first name, my last name, but you're going to notice that the DOB is not, it is not the birth date that I assigned, it is a date object. On Friday, incidentally, I was born on a Friday. That's one cool effect of this, you'll find out what day you were actually born on. Friday, December the 22nd, 1978. There's no timestamp. I think I was born at 8 in the morning. If you click the little arrow beside DOB, you can see that DOB is an object. See, proto object. So that is kind of cool. So let's talk about that proto method that you're seeing there. You should notice that in your console, the person object is displayed with the handy chevron icon. If you click that, you can click the little triangle beside the DOB property, and you will notice a property called proto. We also have a proto property inside this object. So let's click DOB, and you can see the proto beside it. It says object, so I'm going to click that proto. In the first part of learning what prototypal inheritance is, basically, the properties defined under proto are what's inherited by the object. So if you look, there's a whole bunch of methods available to us, right, and properties that are on the date object, and then you'll see another proto. And the way this works is it's called chaining. So we have DOB, which is now an object. It's the new date object, right? Its proto is date, which is an object, okay? So that's its proto. Date also has a proto. If you click date's proto, you will find out date's proto is object. This is the endpoint because object doesn't have a proto. Object is the last point in the chain. Every object in JavaScript ends here. Every single one ends at this object. Every single object in JavaScript inherits from this. Never fail. And then this inherits from nothing. Nothing after this point. All right. So this means that the DOB object is actually inheriting all of the methods and properties from this and all of the methods and properties from date, which is really cool because now DOB we can call .getFullYear or .getDate or any of the functions that we have on the date object itself. So let's do some of that stuff. So first, let's access the first and last name properties. We know how to do that. We just do console.log, the name of our object. So mine's Sean, and first name to access that property. And then I'm just going to duplicate that, and I'm going to grab the last name. And then it spits out in the console, Sean and McKinney. If I console log out the DOB property, so console.log DOB. Oh, sorry, I need Sean.dob. There we go. You'll see that it outputs a string. And the reason is because what's happening, when I console log that out, it takes this, and the JavaScript interpreter immediately calls dot to string on it. And the string method happens to output this very verbose date. All right. If I didn't want to see that, I could call dir instead and actually see the DOB object. So that's quite a bit of information, and obviously it's not necessarily everything you want because the timestamp isn't incorrect. I don't care about the GMT. You know, when I tell somebody the date I'm born, I'm not like, hey, subtract 5 hours. You leave here, right? That's Eastern Standard Time, right? Most people don't care about what time. They probably don't. They probably are more curious why you care what time you're born at. So you can kind of see that we don't need all that information. So in order to limit that down a bit, we're going to call. I'm getting ahead of myself, actually. We're going to access the first. Yeah, that's a copy and paste there. We're going to access the date object and format it to just a normal date object. So we're going to say console.log sean.dob, and then we're going to access a method called toLocal. Now it's not local, it's locale. So there's an E on the end of it. Date string, and you pass it whatever your locale is. So I'm going to pass it en.ca for English Canada. And then it will spit it out in the format for your local area. So in Canada, we format dates by year, month, day. You can change that to US, and I think it does change the format. Yeah, changes it to the slashes, and it does it month, day, year. So there is that cool thing.
It's super annoying if you're never invoicing things from
Oh,
the
yeah.
States and also Canada.
Yep.
Also, can you just like talk aside for the fact that the US doesn't make any sense at all? Like in most places we go like from most narrow to day, month, year.
Yep.
Year, month, day. So the US is like
Month, day,
yeah,
year.
month, day, year.
Yeah. And the funny thing is because of Sesame Street and being born in the 70s and early 80s, for me, formatting dates has always been month, day, year. Because the school systems adopted a lot of US stuff, and that's just the way it was. You guys, you probably got a lot of US English.
No, it's with the British English.
Oh, actually, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
You would have got British English, yeah. So how do you format dates?
It's like date, month, and year.
Day, month, year. Yeah, so in a normal order. Yeah. Actually, what's reprogrammed my brain on how to write dates is SQL. because of the stupid date fields and making sure that I put the date in the damn date field correctly. That's now why I program dates properly. Yeah. Yeah, that'll definitely do it. Okay, so we're going to create a new date format function so that we can format the date how we want to format the date. So to create that, we're going to add inside our date function, inside our person class up here under step 8, we're going to add this dot date format equals function, like so. And then, wow, why did I bail on this? That's really weird. I didn't copy everything in here, so hold on. I did copy it down here, though. So it's let year equal this.dob.get full year is the function you want there. Let month, this is the most annoying thing in JavaScript. This.dob.get month, and I don't know why this is like this, plus 1, because it 0 indexes the months. So 0 is January. So you have to add 1, otherwise you'll get back one thing in advance, one thing in behind than what you're expecting. Yet day doesn't work like that. Let day equal this.dob.get date instead of get day. So this is one of my pet peeves with JavaScript. Because it is a community-based language, there's some inconsistencies on how things are done. And things like that annoy the crap out of me. That's why I hate PHP. Because there's so much of that. Like, so many inconsistencies. But there are obviously libraries. There's the very popular date library available that you can fix this whole system using it. Anyways, suffice to say that. So we're going to return some dirty backticks and format it however you want. I'm going to do the very nasty American way. Maybe I shouldn't say that in a public YouTube video. Get him!
We don't like your
He doesn't want to make America great again. Get him! All right, so we have the date format. And then we're going to spit it out, obviously. So I'll give you a few seconds to finish typing that out. Other languages have very good date methods in them, like PHP has a good date method that allows for formatting. Uses kind of like, are you guys familiar with sprintf? Or have ever used sprintf before? I'd recommend taking a look at it. It's actually sprintf, which I can't remember what the S stands for, but maybe it's standard print format. And basically what it is it takes the string on this side and it runs it through a parsing string on this side. We'll format it based on the parsing string, which is pretty interesting. It's really complex, and I find it difficult to work with. But PHP uses it that you can do like %y and then -%m, %d, and that means year, month, day. And it will format the date into that format for you. And you can do like multiple combinations of that with the time, the date, the days. You can print out full days, stuff like that. So you get a lot of control. All right, so are we good? Or are we still typing? No? Virginia, are you still typing? Not for this thing? Okay. All right, so in step 9, let's do console.log and do your name, right? The name of your object, date format. And then save it. And if it works, you should see your date spit out in the console log. How hard is it going to be to explain proto? 6:30. Whose brains are done? Yeah, I'm kind of sitting there too. All right, so why don't we save proto, the underscore, underscore, proto, underscore, underscore, which I will just call proto, instead of underscore, underscore, proto, underscore, underscore. We'll save proto, and we'll save prototype to next week, and then we'll do the lab, and that'll be like the whole class for next week. And then the following week, we'll get into the web APIs. And trying to access Matt Bass's insult generator, because that's what I used in the summer. Did you get to see that? Did any of the guys show you that? Thing is awesome. It calls you like donkey dick turds and stuff. And it's fantastic. You basically reach out to the API and it returns back an insult string. But we have to put it on an actual server to work with it. I think that would take 2 classes. Yeah, would you guys be open to that? Like setting up like Netlify and actually reaching out, grabbing it, and pulling it back? Like that? Yeah, that's kind of cool. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so not next week, but the following week, we'll set up a little server, which will definitely take half a class. And then we'll reach out to Matt Bass's insult server, and we'll pull back some insults and see what we get.
I'm not sure what.
All right, other than that, let's call it a night. No labs, no quizzes.